Hi there and welcome to today's vlog, and we're back in England after our great week in Scotland. What a beautiful country it is, certainly the part we were at anyway. Now just a quick follow-up from the last vlog when I mentioned that we'd gone along to a church on the Sunday in Callander near where we were staying, and discovered that the 10 o'clock service that was advertised on the notice board didn't actually take place. They don't have a 10 o'clock service at the moment. And not only that, we didn't feel particularly welcome in that church. Anyway, I decided that I'd just report back to them. So I messaged them with our experience. And the good thing is that they were really responsive to what I said and apologised and promised to rectify the issue. So that was a great and a positive response from a church when an issue was pointed out to them. So that's a good example to follow. So good news on that front. Now I want to share with you a quote from C.S. Lewis, one of my favourite authors. He wrote this, and he's talking about the problem of suffering, of pain, etc. Pain insists on being attended to. And then he says, God whispers in our pleasures, speaks in our conscience, but shouts in our pain. Pain is God's megaphone to rouse a deaf world. That's a fascinating quote from C.S. Lewis, that God, though he doesn't cause pain or want pain, nevertheless, he uses it to speak to us, so it can, even though we don't like pain, we don't like suffering, we don't like hard times, nevertheless, God can speak to us through those times. I was reminded of that when I came this morning to my Bible reading, and as I've mentioned before, I've been reading through the Message version of the Bible, and I've got to the very last book in the Old Testament, Malachi, and what I found particularly helpful is Eugene Peterson, who wrote the Message or translated it. He gives an introduction to each of the books of the Bible. And this is what he says about Malachi, which relates to that quote from C.S. Lewis. Most of life is not lived in crisis, which is a good thing. Not many of us will be able to sustain a life of perpetual pain or loss or ecstasy or challenge. But crisis has this to say for it. In time of crisis, everything, absolutely everything, is important and significant. Life itself is on the line. No word is casual, no action marginal. And almost always God and our relationship with God is on the front page. He goes on, but during the humdrum times, when things are, as we tend to say, normal, our interest in God is crowded to the margins of our lives, and we become preoccupied with ourselves. Religion, during such times, is trivialized into asking God questions, calling God into question, or complaining about him, treating the worship of God as a mere hobby or diversion, managing our personal affairs, such as marriage, for our own convenience, and disregarding what God has to say about them, going about our usual activities as if God were not involved in such dalliances. And I found that really fascinating. So he was saying that's the issue that Malachi addresses. And I've got to say, there's truth in that, isn't there? That if our life is going along nice and cozy, easy, got no issues troubling us really, life is pretty good, then there's a temptation always for God in our lives to be put God on the margins, that we just get on with things. We can be tempted to just focus on ourselves, on our pleasures, on life as it rolls along. At least that can be the temptation. But when issues come, when big issues come, when trouble comes, when suffering comes, when relationship struggles, when it could be anything, something happens to upset the equilibrium, then we're much more likely, it seems, to turn to God and seek God's help. And of course, God does respond to our prayers, but God wants to be involved in every part of our life. And my desire, and I'm not always good at this, is to place Jesus at the centre. I preached in our church on Sunday from the letter of Jesus to the church at Ephesus, and though he had lots to commend the church for, he said, "You've lost your first love." And so the challenge for us as a church is Jesus our first love? So I guess the message really is that, yes, God is there for us in the tough times, but God wants to be involved in the good times as well, and every time, the easy times as well as the difficult times. Make God right at the centre. There's a challenge for today. So hope that was thought-provoking. God bless you. Thank you so much, as always, for listening today.